and welcome to this edition of Talk Vietnam. In this session today, we'll meet with a very special person. Now, this British man is a battling adventurer who sold everything he had in order to fund a trip cycling around the world. Starting in November 2012, he has been able to cover a distance of over 30,000 kilometers across 29 countries in Europe, Asia, Africa. And now he's here in Hanoi. And there is actually one more reason that makes his trip all the more spectacular and like none other. And we'll learn more about that very reason in the following session of Talk Vietnam. But for now, we would like to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to give a warm welcome, a big round of applause to our guest today, Mr. Derek Bucock. Hello, Derek. Thank you very much for taking the time to join our show today. How are you?
I'm fine, yes, thank you.
Now, it's amazing the fact that, in this journey of 15 months, you've been able to come across 29 countries. Can you tell us a little bit about how the trip has been going so far in terms of, the ups and downs and the journey itself?
Starting in northern France, as I did in the winter, was hard with the cold, but in terms of the cycling, it was very easy. And back then, when I started, I was in top form, so I was easily able to complete the day's riding. And then the biggest problem then is how to spend the time when you're not on the bike. There's so much diversity from the mountains to the desert, across the Sahara. So yes, that part of the journey, there wasn't any problems until I actually got into Africa for real, and I hit Senegal.
Yes.
And that's when, for the first time, I was robbed.
Yes, I believe your passport was taken.
My passport was taken. Now that was the worst thing, because I was able to fend off the robbers with like a fake credit card. I even gave them the number for it. The really sad thing is I had a few, just a few very personal effects, like my wedding ring and the necklace from my wife, and they took them too. So that was quite distressing on a personal level, but the biggest problem was the loss of the passport. There were no options open to me other than to fly home. But that, at such short notice, was going to take a major part of my funds. And so yeah, that was a low point. That was the only low point in that part of the journey, because I actually did enjoy Africa. I was able to interact with the local people, which was a very special memory for me. I spent a night in a proper, authentic African village in the straw huts amongst the animals.
So there was that kind of minor drawback where you had to fly back to the UK, and then after that you were off into Asia, or?
Yes, into Asia, but this time I went via eastwards through Europe. So I came back again into Belgium, France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and then headed along the Danube, although that wasn't exciting enough for me, so I decided to go into the mountains, and I used the Danube as a guide to get me eastwards. But I didn't stay on the Danube. I went into the mountains and explored. But that was pretty special too, because I entered countries like Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, which was absolutely wonderful. I spent another 8 weeks travelling through Turkey, an amazing country. Very difficult because I had 50-degree temperatures.
Oh dear.
You're changing from Europe to Central Asia,
yes.
And it's a big change. Yes.
Right. And then from there you kind of work your way down, and here you are in Hanoi.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about your journey. But let's go back to the very beginning. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning that you were an adventurer who basically sold everything you had in order to make this trip come true. But what was the motivation behind it? Tell us about the story.
Well, back in 2005, I'd been planning to ride across America. And the idea behind this was have a try at riding across America and see if I liked it, and then consider doing a round the world trip. But the America trip didn't happen because I got prostate cancer in 2005. So that was put on hold, and in the doctor's office, when I was given the news that my cancer had returned, I can honestly say it was an instant decision that I was going to travel around the world. It didn't take any thought whatsoever.
Derek's prostate cancer, diagnosed in 2005, wasn't his first bout of the disease. He was diagnosed with bone cancer at the age of 14, but thanks to new technology in transplantation procedures, he didn't have his leg amputated, but instead ran a marathon for charity 6 months later. The boy grew up with a passion for cycling and photography before ill health prevented him from pursuing the things he loved. Cancer has claimed the lives of his parents, brother and sister, and later on, his wife, Caroline. His heartbreak and the news that his prostate cancer had returned in 2012 plunged the dad of two into a deep depression. Despite his doctor's warning that completing some of the most dangerous sections would be impossible, Derek Woolcock sold or gave away all his possessions and hit the road for one last journey, knowing there was a chance he wouldn't return.
You've endured a lot of physical pain in your life, but also a lot of emotional pain as well. Cancer is something that I believe ran in your family as well. Yes. Can you share with us a little bit more about that?
Most of my family have suffered from one type of cancer or another, and many of them now have passed away from different forms of cancer. For example, my mother died of lung cancer. I had to nurse her for the last 2 years of her life. I learnt at the same time my father had died within the same period, within weeks actually of my mother dying. My father left home when I was a child, so I didn't actually know my father growing up, but we were told that he'd also died of cancer. I lost a brother and a sister to different forms of cancer. But that isn't really what I found the most difficult to deal with. The most difficult was the death of my wife in 2009 to cancer.
If I may step back a little bit, in 2005 you realized that you were diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Yes.
And it was in 2007 that you realized your wife was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yes.
You mentioned that this was kind of one of the biggest kind of devastation.
It was because when I was diagnosed in 2005, I accepted it and I was able to deal with my own cancer. But when my wife got cancer as well, in 2007, it was very devastating because she had to have the mastectomy. There was no choice. She was told that without it, she would die very quickly. So she had the mastectomy, and then in 2009, my cancer came back, and at the same time, almost within a week, my wife's cancer came back. And we were told by the doctors that this time it was secondary stage breast cancer, which is basically terminal. I asked the doctors, I said, well, how long do we have for my wife? And they said, oh, 12 to 18 months. She died 9 weeks later. And you can imagine that for me, that was the hardest thing possible, because when you are told you have 12 to 18 months to spend with somebody the rest of their life, and suddenly they're taken away from you in 9 weeks, it's not enough time. And it wasn't enough time for me. I want to tell you a story here. When the doctors told us we had 12 to 18 months, we said, okay, we're going to make a list of things to do.
Yes.
And we made a list of 10 things that I wanted to do with my wife. And the first thing my wife wanted was, my faith had carried me through. My faith had carried me through the hard times ever since I was a child. And so Caroline had seen the change in me through my faith and how it had helped me with our difficulties. And she said, I want to be baptized. I want to know the faith that you have in these trying times. And her second wish was she wanted to renew her wedding vows, and we did this. And her third wish was she wanted to return to Scotland. Because we'd holidayed in Scotland for many years and it was her favourite place in the world. Well, we couldn't afford to go to Scotland. We didn't have any funds left. We'd used most of our funds to sort of like try and stave off the illnesses and this, because we'd had to go private for some of the treatments.
Exactly.
And another really good story is one of our local charities in Bradford where we were living. They knocked on the door 2 days after we heard the news and said, we want to take you to a holiday for 2 weeks, and they paid for the holiday to Scotland for us.
Yes.
So we got to Holland. So the point of the story is I got to do the top 3 things with my wife, which sort of like helped against losing her so quickly, but not enough. And so I fell into the worst illness. I mean, depression is worse than cancer, because with depression, you don't want to live. You don't want to do anything. Your life becomes meaningless. You wake up some days and you do absolutely nothing. And I lost contact with my friends, my family. I didn't return phone calls. I refused to answer emails. It was a difficult time for me.
Yes. How long did that period last?
If I'm really honest, I tell people that, oh, it didn't last very long. It only lasted 12 months maybe. But the truth is that the depression didn't leave me until the doctor gave me the news. And you might think this is crazy, and people will say, well, how can being told you have terminal cancer be good news? But for me it was the best thing that had happened to me since my wife had died.
How so?
Because it lifted me instantly, like the decision to go cycling. It lifted me instantly out of depression. I had a reason now to live. I had a reason to live. I had a reason to go on this cycle trip around the world. And it was like, you know, if you can imagine being under a huge weight, and it's like the weight being lifted. I felt free for the first time in 5 years.
Yes. The doctor told you how many months that you would have? The
doctor said to me, Derek, you know, your cancer has returned and there's very little point in us giving you treatment this time. When he told me that, I said to him, that's fine, I'd like to go cycling. And he said, oh, that will be really beneficial. Where will you go? And I said, oh, I was thinking of cycling across the roof of the world, the Pamir Highway, and onto the Himalayas. And this doctor's known me for 30 years, and he looked me in the eyes, a smile spread across his face, and he said, Derek, you need to choose an easier challenge.
Yes.
What you are proposing is impossible. He said, you won't even be able to cycle in 12 months. You may well be dead. So he said, it's impossible. And I simply turned round to him and I said, I like impossible. Thank you for being so candid with me. And I walked out the office.
Yes.
Beginning his mammoth ride in November 2012, Derek started off with having set a daily mileage target of 160 kilometers and a budget of €5 a day. This meant no luxuries, and he cooked his own meals and camped down most of the time. During his trip, Derek was able to capture the beauty of the world with his own camera and constantly updated blog. He was robbed 3 times, had his passport stolen, and endured both sub-zero temperatures among some of the world's highest peaks, as well as scorching heat of 48 degrees Celsius in a desert. But all that was a breeze to the solo cyclist compared to nearly being killed in a head-on crash with a jeep in the Wakhan Valley on the Pamir Highway, known as the roof of the world, one of the loneliest places on earth. Although the illness made him lose weight, dropping from 73 kilograms at the beginning to 55 kilograms as of now, he has no intention of stopping until he achieves his dream of riding across America.
In the time that you first started, did you find cycling alone difficult?
The hardest part about solo cycling is what goes on in your head, and that's the hardest part to deal with, because you spend an awful lot of time off the bicycle, and you have to fill that time, and it gives you a chance to think and to ponder, and you have to have a very strong mindset to cope with it. I believe so anyway, and I've spoken with other solo cyclists, and they admit to the same. And the strange thing is that many solo cyclists, when they finish their journey, I know of two that I've been speaking to, they fall into a depression.
Yes.
Because they cannot fill their day anymore. Cycling for over a year without anything but contact with strangers is very, very difficult. You miss the family, you miss friends and comradeship, and just something as simple as a hug can mean an awful lot to you, which is why I use a term in my blog many times, the kindness of strangers, and that's what keeps you going. It's and this is what you'll remember on a cycle trip like mine. You won't, well, you will. You remember the sights and you remember the countries that you visited, but your overriding memories will be the people you've met.
Yes.
And the hugs they give you.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. Can you share with us some of the highlights in your trips? I mean, you've been so many places, 29 countries, as we said, but some of the highlights that stand out.
Armenia. Armenia in the stands.
I believe you mentioned that as one of the most beautiful places that you've been to.
Until I came to Vietnam, Armenia was my favorite country, for three reasons. The first reason is the people. It's one of the poorest countries in that particular area, and one of the poorest countries in the world, but in that particular area it's landlocked and surrounded by much bigger countries. But the people will give you everything they have, and I have first-hand experience of that. I really have. I was taken in and given what little food they had. I shared what I had. It's very humbling. So the people are beautiful. The next is the scenery. The scenery there is just absolutely amazing. For such a small country, it will only take you 2 weeks to cycle around Armenia, but there's so much to see. And the third reason is the architecture, the churches and monasteries. And being a Christian, that's important to me.
Let's fast forward now to the past few weeks. When did you first get into Vietnam, and tell us about your journey so far down to Hanoi?
I arrived at the border of Vietnam and people said to me, okay, be prepared, Derek, to have your Lonely Planet guide taken away from you. Be prepared for 3 or 4 hours at the border. They'll empty out all your bags and give you a lot of hassle, expect the worst. So I'm cycling from China and thinking, oh, heaven knows, I've just had a really horrendous time in China. I really could do with something good happening here. And I arrive at the border and I go through the Chinese side fairly quickly. They couldn't wait to get rid of me. I'd been there for 2 months. And I hand my passport to the Vietnam officer behind the desk, and he takes one quick look at the passport and says, "Welcome to Vietnam." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he flicks through the passport, not even really looking at it, and says, "Do you have any Vietnam currency?" And I said, no, I still have to get some. And he said, "Oh, outside, just to the left," he said, "is an ATM where you can get currency." And he said, "Enjoy your stay in Vietnam." And it took literally 2 minutes to pass through. And they never wanted to look in my bags or anything. It couldn't have been a nicer introduction to Vietnam.
That's a good first impression.
Yeah.
Entering Vietnam in early February 2014, Derek Bucock has so far visited several places in the north, including Sapa, Dien Bien Phu, Hạ Long, Cat Ba, and Hanoi. He wrote in his blog that after 15 months of traveling across the world, so far, Vietnam is his favorite country. He loves the scenery, the real mixture of culture and people, and of course, the food. After arriving in the capital city of Hanoi, Derek was welcomed by members of Couchsurfing, a hospitality exchange and social networking website which offers homestays in various cities of the world. He stayed in Lemming Hill's house, which often hosts world travelers passing through Hanoi and Vietnam. Hill decided to help him for free because of his inspiring story.
Rất nhiều người đi vòng quanh thế giới và người ta đi với nhiều ý nghĩa mục đích khác nhau, và chỉ đơn giản người ta đi được thử thách chính mình để ngắm cảnh. Có khi người ta đi vì vay một cái quỹ, hay là người ta đi về một sự tài trợ để quảng cáo cho một hãng xe hay gì đó. Nhưng mà riêng Derek, ông ấy đi bằng trái tim của ông ấy. Bản thân cái việc đi vòng quanh thế giới đã là một cái việc rất là dũng cảm rồi, nhưng cùng với cái vượt lên trên cái nỗi đau của ông ấy thì mình thật sự cảm động.
Derek fell in love with the city. He decided to spend some more days here as a way to enjoy his chill-out rest period before heading for the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the south. And he has already received offers for free accommodation along the road.
From kind of your background in military and the army, you've taken an interest also to pass by Điện Biên Phủ.
Yes.
Yes. Can you share with us this trip?
Your history is wonderful, I have to say. One of the reasons why I'm loving this country. When I went to the command bunker, I learned a story which was quite unusual about the tenacity about the Vietnam people. When you took the guns through the mountains to overlook the French position, when the artillery opened fire on the French artillery commander, a man named Charles Piroff, Lieutenant Colonel, he committed suicide with a hand grenade at the shame of the Vietnamese people being able to do this, because they said it was impossible. Nobody can dig tunnels through the mountains and drag the guns through. And you did it. You did it, you proved the impossible was possible. And that resonated with me because you know my story,
yes,
the impossible is possible.
Is possible.
But it's not just that, it's your amazing tenacity, you know. Many times as I read your history, there were examples of the French underestimating you. I mean, the French had a really good air force, but they underestimated the power of your anti-aircraft guns, and the amount of planes that you shot down was beyond their expectations. So, you know, it's no surprise to me that a huge force like the French you were able to expel from your country.
Yes.
You later went on to do the same with the Americans. Now, if they'd taken the time, even the small amount of time I took to learn your history, if they'd done the same, I don't think there would have been a second Indochina war. But that's another story.
Exactly. And I think it's also quite meaningful that you're bringing up this again this year, because it's actually the 60th year of the Điện Biên Phủ victory.
Wow.
It's been 60 years since that happened.
That's amazing.
It's, you know, it's wonderful to see that it still inspires many other people. And as you said, it was also a story of, you know, something thought to be, you know, you can't do it, but
yes,
we ended up being able to do it anyway. Now, talking about Hanoi, you said that you originally planned to stay here for only 4 days, but you've been here for a few weeks now. How do you feel being here in the capital city? I know that you're not into big cities that much.
I had misgivings about coming to Hanoi initially until I got here, and I actually enjoy riding in amongst the traffic with my bicycle, you know, in amongst the scooters, in amongst the cars. I actually do enjoy it. People think I'm crazy.
You're probably the first person that I've spoken to on their first visit to Vietnam that enjoys the traffic.
Oh, no, I do. I do enjoy it. I see it as a challenge. I'm not frightened because, believe me, if you can cycle in London, London is probably the most dangerous capital city in the world.
Yes, quite crazy city to cycle.
To cycle in. So if you can cycle in London, you can cycle anywhere in the world. And I get a great buzz out of cycling. And that's why I like Hanoi, because it has a vibrancy. And that's shown in the traffic, but it's also shown in the food stalls, in the cafes. I mean, you have so many cafes here that serve so many different kinds of cuisine. That's another reason I love Hanoi.
Yes. Do you like the food?
Oh, I love the food. I love the food here, yeah. But what I love about this country the most is your youngsters and the way they've accepted me. You know, I mean, I'm old enough to be their grandfather, yet they're welcoming me with open arms, hugging me most of the time, something which I've sadly missed a lot of. And they have this expectation of a great future for the country and for themselves.
And the doctor, he looked me in the eyes. I have no
During a short time in Hanoi, Derek had a few sharing sessions with Vietnamese youngsters. They came first out of curiosity, but later on became so inspired by his story. Derek was successful in spreading his message of never giving up and overcoming own hardships in order to achieve their dreams.
Cảm giác mình thương bác ấy là một người biết cái căn bệnh tình của mình, nhưng mà bác vẫn kiểu cố gắng nỗ lực vươn lên và hoàn thành ước mơ của mình. Và sau khi kiểu thương thấu hiểu thì bắt đầu cảm phục bác và cái khâm phục cái ý chí và cái sự lạc quan yêu đời của bác. Em có đam mê đi du lịch vòng quanh thế giới, và từ câu chuyện của bác thì dường như nó đã tiếp thêm cho em rất nhiều cái sức mạnh và cái đam mê, làm cho em cảm thấy đam mê hơn và em sẽ cố gắng nhiều hơn để thực hiện được cái ước mơ của mình.
Guillem Volsterio, a Spanish national currently living in Vietnam, also made a world bicycle tour with his wife in 2011. After hearing Derek's story and meeting him at his bicycle shop, Guillem felt a connection right away. Derek's journey is certainly different from what he experienced a few years ago.
I think for the circumstances he passed, he's really strong mentally, because he's dealing with an illness, and at the same time, the life on the road when you're cycling is very strong. So I think he's really a top star on this cyclotouring world.
Derek himself took inspiration from sporting queen Jane Tomlinson, an athlete from Yorkshire who raised £1.85 million for charity by completing a series of athletic challenges despite suffering from terminal cancer. He is now passing on that inspiration to others with his own story, and by sharing that, he can also improve himself.
Now, you shared recently in your blog, and you mentioned this earlier, that you've changed. And if I may quote something on your blog, you said, "I have become a more complete person. I'm no longer this selfish guy who left England on November 13th, 2012. Not only do I now share my story, I share everything I can, and my goal now is to give something back." Can you elaborate on this?
Yes. I speak about being a selfish person. When I went into depression, I shut everybody out of my life, basically. I lost a lot of really good friends who had been very kind to me over the years. And I basically built a wall up around myself. And so when I decided that I was going to come back into society, I was very much an isolated, lonely person, but I was also very, very me-orientated. I was looking at what had happened to me. and I was feeling sorry for myself. As I've come along the journey and met people who have given me, you know, what they have, everything they have in some cases, and shared with me their own stories. For example, in France, I met my first couple in warm showers. The wife of the couple, I stopped with them for 2 days, and the wife of the couple, through chatting and through just sharing stories, admitted to me that she'd suffered from depression for 30 years. You know, and I began to share my story. For the first time, I started to speak to strangers and share my story. And through doing that, along this journey that I've been on, through doing that, I started to open up. I started to actually begin to like myself. The realization that I'm actually affecting people's lives and I'm actually doing good now has made me begin to like myself. Well, I do like myself now, but it took a long time. It did take a long time.
What are some of the other stories of the people that you've inspired or the people that you've been able to share your story with and made a difference in their life?
Well, one of the things that I'm the most proud of is I began cycling with another British cyclist called Clive from England. And we cycled together for quite a while, and during this time Clive confided in me, which was quite unusual because he again was a very close person, but he confided in me that his father actually had cancer. And so I immediately became interested, and the doctors say, oh, he's okay at the moment, you know, they're giving him 12 to 18 months to live. So anyway, we ride together for maybe 4 or 5 days, and he turns around to me and he says, oh, my father's got an infection. And I said, Clive, you need to go home. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, Clive, you need to go home. I said, it's not with cancers, with most types of cancers, it is not the cancer that kills people. I know, I've seen too many and I've done too much research. With cancers, it's more often than not a complication and usually an infection that will kill people.
And it will happen so quickly. And
it can happen very, very quickly. This is what happened with my wife. So I said to Clive, I told Clive this, and he said, no, the doctors say he's okay, that he's going to be okay. I don't need to go home. I don't want to finish my journey, you know. And I said, please, you know, just take my advice and go home. Anyway, he did. He phoned his sister and he got on a plane home. 2 days after he arrived in England, his father died. He was able to see his father in the hospital before he died. And Clive wrote me an email afterwards, you know, and the words in that email will resonate with me for the rest of my life because he couldn't thank me enough for helping him to see his father one last time.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's one of the good things I've managed to do.
Yes. There's a part, you know, where there's a certain time in life where, you know, you've only realized that you've got so much time with the ones that you loved, and to make the most out of that time.
Yes.
It's something that a lot of people actually do not realize until they've lost someone they love. Yes. Now in the following clip, we'll come to another uplifting story. Now here in Vietnam, there are actually quite many people who share kind of the same story with Derek, who have overcome and trying to overcome their disease and their illness in order to see a sense of positivity and motivation and overcome the daily hardships of their illness. And Derek, during his trip here in Vietnam, was able to meet one such person, and we'll see more about that story in the following clip.
The Pediatric Oncology Faculty of National Cancer Hospital No. 2 in Hanoi is the place Derek chose to visit a young man of great will and optimism, Chư Đức Liêm. Born in 1992, Liêm is the hope and pride of the family because he has always achieved good academic results at school. At the age of 16, Liêm was diagnosed with bone cancer. One of his legs had to be amputated, but he went on to complete his studies and gained second prize at a history examination for gifted students. Unfortunately, in November 2013, Liam's cancer came back and spread to his lungs. For Derek, the trip today has therefore brought back unpleasant memories of the past.
It's difficult to see people that are having treatment because I know how painful it is, how difficult it is. And this is why I get upset, because I've been there. I've done it, I now refuse treatment, but it's very difficult for me.
Em cảm thấy rất là xúc động khi biết được những gì mà bác đã trải qua. Và thực sự lúc đó em cảm thấy rất là khâm phục cái nghị lực phi thường của bác và cái việc của bác khi bác đã có thể vượt qua được những cái biến cố rất là lớn như thế trong cuộc sống của mình. Và đặc biệt đó là một cái hành động của bác, đó là đạp xe đi qua các nước. Từ đó thì em đã học tập được rất nhiều ở bác, đó là nghị lực vươn lên cũng như là cái tấm lòng sống vì cộng đồng và sống cho mọi người.
Derek showed Liam some of the pictures he took on the road about the scenery and people he had met. In return, Liam told him about his participation in a lot of social activities to encourage cancer patients to be optimistic and believe in life.
Khi là sống trong một hoàn cảnh bệnh viện này, khi mà nhận được cái sự quan tâm giúp đỡ của cộng đồng thì em thấy em cũng rất là mong muốn mình làm một điều gì đó cho những các bạn mà cùng cảnh ngộ cái em như là mắc bệnh ung thư như em. Chính vì vậy mà em đã đến năm 2022 em đã cùng phối hợp với em đã cùng với các bạn trong câu lạc bộ Hoa Đá tổ chức Tết cho các bé tại khoa nhi bệnh viện K2, cũng như là tháng 7 năm 2012 thì em cũng đã lên được ý tưởng làm một bữa cơm để vào từ thiện cho và tặng cho các bệnh nhân tại khoa nhi của viện. Và có rất nhiều những kế hoạch nữa em muốn thực hiện, nhưng do điều kiện sức khỏe hiện tại thì không cho phép, nên em hy vọng rằng là mình sẽ mau chóng mạnh khỏe để có thể tiếp tục thực hiện những kế hoạch của mình.
This is very, very inspiring, and I think it's the whole point of my message, which is to make the most of your life. Don't give up. Just because you have an illness, don't give up. Make the most of your life, and he is doing so. And I will go away, and I will go away a better person from it. This has come from Kazakhstan. It was given to me, and it means a lot to me, but I'd like you to have it. It's beautiful.
Now, Derek, I understand that you've met today a young man named Chu Đức Liêm, who has been able to kind of prove an inner strength, just like you.
Yes, amazing character.
Yes, tell us about your visit to the hospital to meet him.
I think today for me has been one of the hardest days of my tour so far, because meeting Liam brought back all my old wounds. I went to the ward, I saw the other cancer patients, it brought back memories of my wife being pumped full of drugs, and me also. It was very painful, but it was also the most inspiring day that I've probably had so far. What really inspired me about Liam was the fact that he's got a positive energy about him. I could tell that just from sitting next to him. And that's my message to other people. Take comfort from people like Liam, and dare I say myself, because we have an air of positiveness about us, and it grows, and people can see that, they can see it in us. I think that's very, very important. If you go around miserable and feeling sorry for yourself, and you're going to project that to other people, who are you going to help? Right. You're not going to help yourself, but you're not going to help any other people. But if you can share a message that you're actually going to try and improve your life, Liam has certainly got plans for the future.
Yes. What would be your advice to people out there wanting to take on a journey like you, wanting to cycle around the world or walk around the world, or take a journey that's probably beyond themselves?
Well, my first advice is go out and do it. Don't wait until you're old, certainly, because it's very much harder. But you have to realise I was a very fit sportsman, so although I am quite elderly, I'm effectively 20 years younger because of the sports that I did.
Yes.
But no, what I would say to people is go when you're young. Take a gap year if you have to, but travel, because the people you meet while travelling will give you experiences more than any job will, more than any sitting behind a desk or classroom. Learning in life from travelling is, in my opinion, the best way to learn. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is do some homework, because it's hard. It's not all, nice and comfortable in this. It's really, really hard and difficult to do. Yes. So do some homework. Make sure you do homework on the kit that you need, the bike that you need, and in particular, study where it is you're going to do. Take the time, as I have done, to learn about the people and the culture, because how are you going to enjoy yourself if you just transiting through a country and you don't take time to enjoy the culture and the people and understand them? So that's some of my advice. And the last piece of advice is, if you're considering a journey solo, think very carefully, because it's hard work.
Yes, you have to come well prepared, and not only, in terms of equipment, but also mentally.
Yes.
You have to be prepared as well. Well, thank you so much, Derek, for coming here and sharing your story with us. It's definitely touched me, and I'm sure it will touch a lot of our audience here in Vietnam as well as abroad. And I hope the fire that I see in you, this fire of positivity and of motivation, will continue to burn brightly in you, and that you will continue your journey with the best of luck and success.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please give us a round of applause. And that wraps up our edition of Talk Vietnam, this time with Derek Bukak. We really hope that his story, as it has touched me, touched you, and giving you inspiration to believe that, as he says many times over in this Talk edition, the impossible is possible. And if you put your mind to it, you'll definitely overcome the odds, defy the impossible to make your dreams come true. Thank you very much for joining in this edition, and we'll be back again next time here on Talk Vietnam. Goodbye.
The darkest moments of my life are what has made me into the strong character I am. It's at times of hardship that the best comes out of you. You can achieve anything if you have belief.